I really missed the landing zone there. Yeah, how you doing? I said I had three of these Navy SEALs. They're actually genuine Navy SEAL backpacks. They don't make them anymore. I have a couple of them. I use them all the time. I think I listed them too cheap because I've only got one left. They're these kind of neat. The central compartment. You can send me an email if you're interested. I only got one left. The zipper is a waterproof zipper, and the inside is waterproofed, and even the seams are sealed. It's a really neat backpack. It's a genuine, has an NSN number. That's a military number for those of you that don't know. Genuine mil-spec and actually used by the Navy SEALs, but these are brand new. They're the exact same ones used by the Navy SEALs. I really love super tough stuff that's designed to last forever. All of a sudden, I hadn't had like a belt order in a long time. And I got 4 belt orders. Here's one of them, by the way, is a solid brass buckle. And these are the belts that I make. It's kind of amazing how long it takes to make a simple belt. I don't actually use the Chicago screws in the center because the threads on those will actually snap when you least expect it. I actually sew them super tough with the same sort of box and cross-stitching like they would do on seat belts and skydiving equipment, so that they're tough, tough, tough. I love tough stuff that you can only make yourself. So that's what I was doing last night. I was making belts. I want to talk about the holographic universe and some things that a lot of people actually don't think about. And none of us do. I was saying on live stream last night, and actually the time before, that nature is screaming at humanity, but humanity doesn't really have their eyes open. We're too worried about paying bills and chasing after the opposite gender, which of course is perfectly natural. I mean, that's propagation of the human species, so it's perfectly natural. I'm not, downgrading it or anything, but sometimes it's not stopping and smelling the flowers, which is a really good thing. I'm actually going to go up to my cabin tomorrow, but I can't spend the night because I'm so busy. But I'll take about I'll take about an hour out to smell the flowers. But humanity needs to take a look at what's important, because it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. You come into this world with nothing, and you're going to leave it with nothing. And of course, coming into the world is truly holographic. And we talk about holography, we're talking about lasers and reference beam and the scatter beam and the actual constructive and destructive interference that actually occurs. Most people don't even know how a hologram is made. You're talking about the nothing that is, and kind of a silly word like counter space, and of course holography by definition is projection. Magnetism, by definition, is projection. The one thing all the scientists have right, well, they got it 99% right, kind of, sort of. They say every atom is 99.999% empty space. In other words, like an atom, relatively, is just this supermassive orb with a tiny nucleus of X number of protons and neutrons in the center. There's no such thing as an electron, and that's not me saying that. Nikola Tesla said that. So we can eliminate everything down to one particle. All scientists agree that all free neutrons, you can go look this up, by the way, all free neutrons, once they're ejected from the nucleus, become protons. After 17 minutes, they've actually technically clocked it. So if all free neutrons become protons, then that thing that we call a neutron must be a phase modality of a proton. So really there's only fundamentally one particle. Yeah, but what about the volume of every atom? Well, every atom is a magnetodielectric dynamo. It's creating a whirlwind of energy. But everything of mass and magnitude in the universe is due to magnetism. The geometry of magnetism is a torus, kind of like these little tangerines. These are really sweet ones that have no seeds in them, by the way. Of course, they are little toroids once you take the peel off, and after you take the peel off, you have this neat little torus. You have this neat little hole right in the middle there. And I'm sure, as you know, and it's no different than an apple. An apple is an oblate torus, of course, depends on the apple. And interestingly enough, by saying oblate torus, it means one end is bigger than the other. Here's a real question. Which end would be the south end on this fruit or an apple or a pear? A pear is a real oblate torus, but the pear is still a torus. Basically, when you say oblate torus, you mean it's squished. One end of it's squished in appearance geometrically, but it's still a torus. Which end would actually be the North Pole and which end would be the South Pole? Of course, the stem is right here. Same is true on an apple, and down here is, you know, the base of the fruit, the base of the apple. Yeah. It's much, much larger on one end of an apple, but what would this be? That would be the northern end. The growth occurs down here, but it's fed from here. We have a ratio of proportionality of 1 to 5. I don't want to get too deeply in it. I want to talk about the actual holographic universe. So, same as like a navel or belly button, all the orifices that we actually have in our body, eyes, ears, nostrils, and those other things. Kind of course, everything in the universe is either coming into a hole or out of a hole, or trying to create something by trying to get back into one. I think you know where I'm talking about when referring to that. What about holography of the universe? Holography, by definition, is projection. You might want to look up how a hologram is made, but don't want to take the holographic paradigm too far. Holograms using lasers, there's actually a few different ways of making holograms. It doesn't actually have to be necessarily a laser, and they actually even created holograms before lasers existed by using mercury arc lamps. They'd use frequency filters and create point source, and then of course you have a reference of pure frequency. You have the reference, and then you actually have the scattering of whatever object it is you're projecting on. Of course, then it's recorded on film. Holographic positive is quite phenomenal. You can actually take the lower portion or any portion of it where the image is not, and the larger, project laser light back through it, and you'll actually see the entirety of the entire thing and the little portion up in any corner where you actually don't see the image on the whole. So if holography is magnetism, and magnetism, of course, is mass and magnitude, because that's what this is a torus, this little tangerine or even an apple. I mean, it's a donut. It's a hole in the center, and instead of saying a torus, we could say a donut. Well, if that's a projection, then what would nature's, and of course there's countless examples of this, what would nature's examples of an anti-projection be? This is a projection and it is toroidal, and any projection would be dielectric, and the dielectric geometry, of course, is an hourglass. This is a hyperboloid. This is an anti-projection. The inverse image of a torus, right here, is this, a hyperboloid. Right there in the center where nothing is, of course there is sand passing through there. We can't take that analogy too far. What would an anti-projection in nature be? An electrical ground. Here's a neat little English word that we got. A ground. We've all heard that. We never think about this. I've been told many countless thousands of times the word, there's no such thing as counter space, is crazy. Well, I don't care what you call it. You go by countless other words, and geometrical and even anti-geometrical. Of course, an anti-projection or an anti-torus would be definitionally, logically, and rationally so anti-dimensional in its vector. And its terminus would be anti-dimensional, non-Cartesian, but that's not really accurate. Say anti-Cartesian. People can't wrap their mind around anti-Cartesian. So an electrical ground is no different than saying counter space, no different than saying an anti-projection, no different than saying anti-Cartesian. What would be another one? Lightning. Lightning is a desaturation. It's always a discharge into counter space. Or we could say a discharge into a ground. Lightning wants to ground itself. Everybody thinks lightning grounds itself in the ground, and that's kind of true, but it's not really true. It's actually a desaturation discharge into counter space. People think lightning strikes ground to cloud, and cloud to ground, which sometimes does occur, or even cloud to cloud. It's actually a desaturation into counter space. That's an anti-projection. What's another natural phenomena that is anti-projectional or anti-dimensional? Like that silly little thing human beings call a black hole. That's an anti-projection. What's another one? Any so-called magnetic attraction which is not based in magnetism. Magnetism, by definition, of course, is always centrifugal force in motion. It is dimensional by definition. Anything in the centrifugal is a force vector. The three-dimensional force vector that extrapolates out the torus, what's the inversion of that? Well, of course, it's the hyperboloid. In the true hyperboloid, the sand would be on both sides, and they would be both accelerating towards this null point and actually vanish right there. So-called magnetic attraction. Increasing amperage. Here's something fascinating when actually power lines, and nobody's really standing outside in a lightning storm for obvious reasons. But on the alternating current on the power lines, when they're actually struck by lightning, if it's in the vicinity, what will happen is the power lines will get an increase in dielectric capacitance. Smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. You know what happens? Say lightning strikes half a mile down the road, power lines. This is almost never observed. There are a few YouTube videos of this. What happens to the AC power lines, because the actual geometry of the cross-section of the AC power lines is actually between the two? What happens? They actually swing together. They decrease the space because the capacitance increases. Every atom by volume is due to magnetism and magnetism only. Increasing the amperage in the power lines causes the power lines to swing together. This is just a silly word for counter space, and I agree that the word counter space, of course, is kind of incorrect. All of this applies, too, with consciousness and mind. Now, English people are confused. The metaphysics of consciousness and mind is between your ears. That thing called the brain, that is the seat of consciousness, because consciousness is the consubstantiality of the signal, i.e. the spirit, and of course the brain. Consciousness goes no further than the psychophysical being, just as the actual broadcast that actually comes out of the speaker of this radio.
North Central Kentucky, Northwest Kentucky, and South Central Kentucky.
What comes out of the speaker is not the signal. Sure it is. No, the signal is everywhere and nowhere. There's no signal in the antenna. The antenna, of course, is the tuner for the signal. You have the analog to digital processor and the battery in here, which is no different than us eating calories. You know, to have consciousness, people that are extremely malnourished don't think very much because every calorie is spent to keep their heart beating, of course, but that's another analogy. Consciousness goes no further than the psychophysical. It's the consubstantiality of matter and spirit. The brain. Mind would be analogous to the signal. The ancient Pali and the Greek for this is the nous, or the chitta. The ancient Egyptians is nearly the same word, the chit. Can't think your way out of a thinking box. Yeah? Nihil ex nihilo. From nothing comes nothing. But by nothing, we mean a mirage. Everything either comes out of a hole or goes back into a hole. Life, all experiences that we actually have. This tangerine is fed right through there, which is now, of course, a hole. And we have this toroidal geometry. Of course, the torus is the fruit. There's actually, of course, an enormous amount of force used to actually create this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this tangerine, or even an orange or an apple, is the product of sun, water, minerals, a lot of growth, photosynthesis, force. Analogously, of course, this tangerine is magnetism. And its geometry is identical to that. Obviously, not all fruit is toroidal. The apple and the pear, for example, are oblate toruses. So, if the tangerine is magnetism analogously in nature, and of course nature is screaming at all of humanity, then what would be the dielectric? Right here. Well, there's nothing there. No, you're confusing nothing with not a thing. Energy or rest. So if the fruit is the magnetic, then what would be the dielectric? What would be the hyperboloidal fruit? Well, I'm pretty sure at the center of this orange where nothing is would be the dielectric. At the center of an apple, there is no apple. There are these little hollow spots called seeds. I'm pretty sure those seeds would be rest energy. People's like, what's the definition of energy? Definition of energy expenditure is the creation of this tangerine or that apple. The definition of rest energy would be this hollow spot in this tangerine. It would be those little rest energy nuggets, point sources of inertia at the center of an apple. Because the center of an apple, nobody eats the center of an apple. these little hollow spots and these little seeds. Now, seeds can sit for, they've actually found some in ancient Chinese tombs. They actually regrew a magnolia plant that had 7 petals on the flower, and like that hasn't existed for countless thousands of years. So they could sit there for endless thousands of years, sometimes, usually not. And we could still get another tree or fruit tree or, you know, whatever it is the seed comes from. So that would be the analogy of rest energy. People can't wrap their mind around rest energy. People also, too, can't wrap their mind around anything in nature because mind itself is that which people are trying to wrap their mind around. You can't think your way out of a thinking box, or I should say, you can't mentate. Mentation, of course, is mano in ancient Pali, meaning thought. People are trying to think their way out of a thinking prison or a thinking box, and of course you can't do it. Mano kavinyanam, the ancient Pali passage, which means mentation and consciousness, or to thought and consciousness. Can't do it. It's projection and mirage. Instead of saying mano kavinyanam, which in English, I know you don't speak ancient Pali, thought and mentation, this is no different than saying projection and mirage. Thought and consciousness is no different than saying projection and mirage. The signal which is not in the radio is a projection. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a broadcast station, right? Isn't that a projection? The mirage, by the way, because all light, all EMF, all radio, has a transverse frequency, which is an incomplete torus. You know when it does complete a torus? When its energy capacitance is so high it reaches capacitance barrier for propagation. That's what we call fundamental matter, or hydrogen. Everything in nature, from macro to micro, from atomic to consciousness and mind, this is what people can't wrap their mind around. We're going to read, and unfortunately a lot of Sanskrit to English translations will talk about pure consciousness, and that's very, very unfortunate. I know it's translated that way by a lot of people from Devanagari, i.e. Sanskrit, into English, but it shouldn't say that. No such thing as pure consciousness in the absolute sense. We have nous, or chitta, as a transcendent, which would be the signal outside of the radio, of course, radio analogous to the body. That which, of course, tunes the manifestation of mind, or nous, or chitta, both Greek and Pali, is, of course, the antenna, and that, of course, in the human body is water. The processing of that, of course, is consciousness. So mentation, or thought, i.e. mano, and consciousness, or vijnana. By the way, some of these terms in ancient Pali and in ancient Greek are 100% accurate both metaphysically and transcendently perfect. The word for consciousness in ancient Pali is vijnana. Vijnana is no different than saying projection or hologram. It is vi plus root jnana or gnosis in ancient Pali, jnana or gnosis in Greek. This literally means a hologram of jnana or gnosis, or pure mind. And that, of course, is what any modulation is in any signal. No radio can tune anything that doesn't have a modulation, but that modulation or frequency and wavelength, of course, is a projection. It is holographic. Holography is a projection. Anything that is projective, by definition, has a frequency. I can actually, not that I want to draw on this with a Sharpie marker, because I want to eat it later, and I don't believe in wasting food, said the fat guy. I can actually draw a three-dimensional force vector on the outside of this torus, of this tangerine, and take a one-dimensional slice of that and look on it edgewise and actually repeat it, and it'll be no different than any radio signal. We actually have an incomplete torus that is a medium propagation due to its frequency and its capacitance. When the capacitance is so high that it can't propagate anymore, then we have this neat little thing called a proton, and we have hydrogen, and all atoms are compounded hydrogen. So you can actually explain in simplex light, radio, modulation, mind, consciousness, nous or chitti, spiritus sanctum, matter, capacitance, ground, lightning, black holes, so-called magnetic attraction, which is not magnetism at all, rather dielectric acceleration. That which we actually call electrostatics, you know, when your socks stick together after you pull them out of the dryer. that which we call lightning, that which we call gravity, which is an anti-field or dielectric acceleration, non-point source mutual mass acceleration, that which we call magnetic attraction. All those things are exactly one and the same thing. The only difference in the two is one is point source and the other one is non-point source. There's actually 5 things that I mentioned there. They're absolutely identical. Lightning, electrostatics, so-called magnetic attraction, gravity, the phenomena thereof, mutual mass acceleration. That is an anti-projection. It is the erasure of space. Space is the after effect of, and space is no different than a shadow. Even Nikola Tesla said this, a shadow's not a thing, but we know it's kind of a thing conventionally only because when we stand in a shadow we feel cold and we can't see anything because we're in a shadow, there's no light. A shadow's not a thing, a shadow's an absence of something. An absence of pure potentiality, i.e. rest energy, i.e. inertia, is what? It's all divinely simple. It's all laid right out for you. All you need is a legend. You know what a legend is? It's that little key in the bottom of old paper maps. People don't use paper maps anymore, I know, but there's still a legend or a key. If you have that legend or key, and 80% of it I laid out for you in this video, then understanding absolutely everything out there in the damn universe and everything you see when you bebop up and down the streets, talking to people, how their mind works, what the distinction is between mind, brain, and consciousness. Because consciousness and thought exist between your 2 ears. Mind, as in the premise of chitur nous, is ab extra, like the signal. There's no signal in the radio. The signal is, where is it? It's everywhere and nowhere, right? When I turn on this radio, there ain't no signal in the radio. The radio is tuning that in. That broadcast that comes out of the speaker ain't the same thing as the signal. Broadcast comes out of the speaker is the interpolation of the signal by the antenna and the analog to digital converter and a few other things, and of course is spit out. That would be analogous to consciousness because the broadcast is the mixing. Instead of saying consubstantiality, make it really simple. Consubstantiality is basically no different than saying the mixing of something. Like if I had an apple and an orange here, which I don't, and I threw them in a blender, turn on the blender, you know, you got a mix of 2 things, and, well, it's appley and orangey at the same time. That's what consciousness is, i.e. the consubstantiality of the signal and, of course, the radio. Consciousness goes no further than what's between your ears. So the ideation of pure consciousness is actually heretical, nonsensical, but unfortunately, a lot of Sanskrit translations will say pure consciousness, but that's not what the actual Sanskrit or the Devanagari says, and it certainly ain't what the Pali says. They all actually say the same thing. It's very unfortunate that they've chosen pure consciousness, of which there is no such thing. It's like saying pure poo. It's purified poo. Like, yeah. Never purify gold, once again, that perfect analogy, and the ancients use this as well. Gold purification is quasi-nonsensical because gold is never purified. It's extrapolated out from and extracted from something that is scattered amongst. So when we say gold purification, we're going to remove the impurities. Gold is gold is gold. We can't purify gold because gold is pure by definition. What we're actually saying when we say purified gold is extracting gold from that which it is mixed in with. Of course, the consciousness is mixed in with body, therefore, logically and rationally, it can't be purified. And that's not my position, it's the position of the ancients, the Greeks, the Egyptians, on and on and on. Can't actually purify the broadcast, because the broadcast is what comes out of the speaker.
Current time is 10:39 p.m.
Yes, 10:39 p.m. Everything in nature is screaming at humanity, but humanity refused to listen. If you understand projective geometry, which is toroidal, force and motion, centrifugal, divergence, the creation of space, this torus, of course, has a volume. That's the creation of space. And, of course, space is the impotency of energy. Isn't it true that if you take the seed from an apple and you grow it and you water it and photosynthesis and give it 30, 40 years, however long it takes, that's an enormous amount of release of energy. A lot of force, a lot of movement of a lot of things, mineral, water, photosynthesis, the tree working hard to create this little force nugget. Of course, it's really tasty to eat this little force nugget because a torus, by definition, is force. I laugh at people that laugh at the idea of counter space. Whatever you want to call it, I don't care. It's an anti-projection. All of these things are all throughout nature. A ground, an electrical ground. There are different types of ground, but everybody kind of knows what an electrical ground is. That's anti-projection. That's anti-toroidal. It's anti-Cartesian. You could say non-Cartesian, but it's more accurate to say anti-Cartesianal. And that's not anything nobody ever normally says, of course. Anti-Cartesianal. People are like, what? What are you talking about? You using them big words again? Like, no, I'm not actually. It's just you don't think like that. Because you spend your entire life worrying about money and bills and taxes and family, and everybody kind of does. I do get that. They're not actually big words at all. Anti-Cartesian. Yeah. It's a vector away from force and motion. It's like, we all understand force and motion. Most of us do, anyway. Lightning, black holes, so-called magnetic attraction, increasing the amperage on power lines. The unmanifest. Everything in this universe of mass and magnitude is a product and definitionally force. It's the fruit of force. And force is the resultant of the dissipation of energy. In our fruit analogy, the little seeds at the center of that apple, I'm pretty sure is the rest energy analogy. And you grow those and you apply a lot of force, you burn calories, you plant it in the ground, and you water it and you nurture it and you take care of it, and 20, 30 years later, after all that force and photosynthesis, it's making its own fruit. It's making its own little force nuggets. We call a tangerine here a force nugget, or an apple, or a pear, or anything else. The entire universe is a holographic paradigm in absolute simplicity and divinity, but you and everybody else refuses to open up your bleeping peepers and take a look at what is smacking you in the face by that hairy armpit chick we call Mother Nature. People are too busy. I'm too busy, I don't have time for this. I'm going to go change the diaper on the baby, take a shower, get ready for work tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. It's just, I'm not saying you have to stop and smell the flowers, but I mean, stopping and seeing the nature of the universe and what it is and how it works is actually important, even though it doesn't pay the bills. It's a type of fulfillment that you can't put your finger on. It's like, what is it? I don't know. It's just this ineffable understanding where I can see the world as it is, how it is, why it is, very clearly. It doesn't put money in my bank account, but it gives me a divine bliss that lets me see things as they are and understand why they are. And it is blatantly obvious, but you refuse to see it. Not that I'm blaming you. Basically, everybody's like that. If you'd like me to go further onto this premise of the holographic universe, let me know. Because I can go much deeper down the rabbit hole. Like that little hole right there. Well, there's nothing there. Yeah, but this whole tangerine, you know, came into existence by being fed through this little hole right there. Same way that you came into this world from an orifice. You experienced the whole universe through an orifice. Anyway, I could go on about this topic forever. And I could definitely go much further down the rabbit hole. Let me know. I hope you like this video. If you do, check out the description below. You can contact me there. Any donation is always warmly welcome. Lux et veritas. Simplicity is divinity, and this is undeniable.